Good evening. Our first viewer says, I've read the book Real Love twice now, and although it has helped me, I'm still struggling with hurt and anger. My main issue is I work too hard for the people I love. I seem to care more about their happiness than my own. In some ways, this might be a good thing, but I think I need to look after myself more. How does one balance loving others with loving yourself? It's a common thing for people to say that true love is caring, just two separate issues, caring more about other people than yourself. And, you know, that can be a definition just utterly fraught with problems. Because if people attempt to serve other people and care about their happiness and neglect themselves, they end up with nothing. They end up just utterly depleted, exhausted. They neglect their own care, in which case they then become incapable of loving anybody. They can't love other people. They can't take care of themselves. So that's not necessarily so. I can unconditionally love you a lot, care just as much about your happiness as my own, share with you my time, my energy, my resources, and that would be real love, but not care about you more than I care about myself. Now, there would be instances where perhaps a sacrifice might be needed. For example, I'd rather just do nothing today. I'm tired, I'm sick, I don't feel like doing anything. Somebody calls up and they say, do you have some time? Or would you be willing to do something for me? And in that moment, I may think, I really don't feel like doing something, but I think the potential reward here is great. And if I exerted all my effort, I could get myself up to doing this thing. That might be an example of my caring more about my own convenience than caring about being evidence where I care more about you than caring about my own convenience. But I think where we get hung up is that whole idea of loving ourselves, which is really kind of a false notion anyway. We don't need to love ourselves. We get loved by other people. We pass it on to others. Love just becomes an infinite flow that everybody shares. There's no place where I really have to stop and compare my love for you versus with my love for myself. If we just skip that whole step of loving myself, which we can, I don't need to. Then we don't need to do a comparison. It could look like my caring more about loving you than me if, for example, I choose to give my life to save yours. I push you out of the way of the bus and in the process get killed myself. That would be a selfless act. And in that case, you might say loved you more than me. But the real problem is that whole loving myself concept. All we really need to pay attention to is, do we unconditionally care about somebody else's happiness? And that would be an absence of disappointment and irritation. You only have to pay attention to that. You don't have to do the comparison. You more than me. It gets to be a mess. And in fact, many people who profess to love others more than themselves really are just codependent, constantly looking for the approval of other people and therefore serving them all the time, which is what it sounds like is happening with you. People who love and then or what they call love, and then feel hurt or angry are not truly loving. If I genuinely care about you and have no attachment to the outcome and have no need for you to do anything for me, then there's no way I could feel hurt or angry as a result. That can happen only if I have expectations for you to respond in a certain way. Gratitude, attention, approval, a favor in return, whatever. And so what you're doing here, and what many people do, is they do what they call loving, giving. And really there's a hook in it. And if they're not satisfied, then they're disappointed. They're hurt, they're annoyed, they feel even betrayed. So what you describe are the hallmarks of conditional love. You're giving, and you said, but you still struggle with hurt and anger because here you are serving them, and these ungrateful pigs are not recognizing how wonderful and loving you are. I'll never forget the day that I talked to this 70-something-year-old lady, and everybody around her, we were in a group, said, we'd like you to meet Mother Teresa. Essentially, that's what they said. The most loving person we've ever known. And I took one look at her and knew she wasn't Mother Teresa. She had this look of just exasperation in her eye. And so I kind of picked at her a little bit. So what's it like when you serve these people and that or that person? And she still wasn't giving an inch. Oh, no, she just loved the whole world. Then I asked her what her relationship was like with her husband. Oh, her whole demeanor changed. She, after I asked her a few more questions, just exploded. That ungrateful pig, he doesn't understand. She was furious. The group was stunned into silence watching this woman explode. But she'd been giving to him all these years in hopes that he would return something, and he didn't. And it infuriated her. So she wasn't really giving. She was investing. And because she wasn't getting a return on her investment, she was annoyed. And the reason that she went to serving everybody else on the planet is because she got a better return on her investment. Other people would say, oh, you're such a wonderful person. Oh, isn't she great? She's so loving. And so she did it because they appreciated her. But even that was unfulfilling because she acknowledged that when then people didn't respond with gratitude or recognition, she just hated it. So those are just the things for you to be looking for in yourself. If you give to somebody and then you're disappointed, just tell the truth. First to yourself, then to somebody who can see you, and admit that you weren't really loving. I know it can look like loving. You can see two people do exactly the same thing. They will bake a meatloaf and take it over to somebody who's sick, or they'll offer to spend time with them, or whatever the act of service is. Two people can do exactly the same thing. It can look the same from the outside, and one person can be giving unconditionally, and the other person is just furious that they're not getting rewarded as they wish to be. Or, even more subtle, they're not furious. They're delighted to offer the service, but it's still conditional, and the only way they'll ever find out that it is when somebody fails to appreciate them. So it's a tricky little thing. You don't have to just suddenly stop it. You don't have to say, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to give to anybody. I'm not going to have expectations. That's way too much to suggest. You only need to tell the truth about what you're doing and how you feel. Say to somebody, I thought I was way more loving than I really am, but in truth, I want something. I want people to pay me. I want them to love me. I want them to adore me. Oh, in fact, I want them to worship me for being loving. Just saying it is a huge relief. And it gives us both the opportunity to change the behavior, because now we see it, and it gives other people the opportunity to unconditionally accept us. And as we get more of that, we will be able to genuinely give to other people. Here's a viewer who says, in the morning, it takes a lot for me to get motivated to get out of bed. I wake up feeling pretty empty. How do I power up to get going without wearing a mask? I can't stay in bed all day and go through the emotions, so any ideas? So imagine you've been trading imitation love with people all your life, which is true of most of us. Initially, that's rewarding, but the excitement always wears off. So now when you get up in the morning, without real love, you don't have enough of that yet, and when the excitement of imitation love has worn off, what in the world would motivate you to get out of bed? You don't have enough real love. Imitation love has failed you, so now you have nothing. And boy, it's pretty hard to motivate ourselves to get up and do something when we've got no real love and no imitation love either. And that's the place that many people find themselves in as they're learning about real love. They realize that what they've been doing is wrong, but they don't have enough real love yet, so it's like, So what can you do? Just, again, tell the truth. Call people. Immerse yourself in the process of learning about real love and in the process of finding it, which would mean calling people, talking to them, talking to friends, going on the website and participating in the conference calls that are every day of the week, and just tell them, I'm empty. I don't even want to get out of bed. There's nothing that motivates me. I just feel empty and worthless. And see what people say. Give them a chance to love you for who you really are as opposed to who you've been pretending to be. And with most people, this is hugely effective. Now, there are some people who, after trying real love, like diligently, not once in a while. If you try it once in a while, it's not going to do anything. Because you're talking about reversing the inertia of a lifetime. But if you really apply the principles, you really go out there and try to find it, and then still you feel this emptiness, this lack of motivation to do anything, then it might be worth considering the possibility of depression, clinical depression, which is very common. As much as 10% of people in the United States at any one time may be suffering from various degrees of depression, and some people have it their entire lives. So feeling sad occasionally, that's normal. Feeling down occasionally, especially when in association with difficult events. But when this condition becomes chronic or overwhelming, as in prevents you from doing things that you would really like to do or that you ought to do, then it's worth considering diagnosis and treatment. So some of the symptoms of depression are, sounds redundant, but a depressed mood, as in just no fire, no happiness, no smiles. Abraham Lincoln suffered with depression his whole life, or much of his life, adult life, and said at one place, and I may misquote it by a word or two, but he said, if the darkness I feel were to be spread evenly among all the members of mankind, there would not be a smile on the face of the earth. So he understood what it meant to be afflicted by genuine depression. Loss of interest in activities that you once found enjoyable. You used to have a hobby that you loved. Now, you used to just love to go down to the dump and shoot rats. And, now it's like, you could take it or leave it. You just lose interest in things that you used to like. Fatigue, decreased energy, just haven't got the energy to do anything. Feelings of guilt, worthlessness, helplessness, hopelessness, pessimism. Everything just looks, it's like the Winnie the Pooh character, Eeyore. No matter what people say, well, why don't we, what good would that do? There's nothing I can do about anything. And that's very common in depression. Sleep problems, can't get to sleep, or you can go to sleep, but you wake up 4 hours later and that's it. You can't go back to sleep again. Difficulty concentrating, agitation, restlessness. You just can't focus on one thing for any period of time. Change in appetite. Some people eat more, other people eat less. Persistent sad, empty, or anxious feelings. Or persistent aches and pains, stomach pains, headaches, and so on, despite being worked up and treated for any potential organic problems. In other words, not psychosomatic, ulcers and so on. Chronic discouragement, thoughts of suicide. These are all just, many of the symptoms of depression, and you don't have to have all of them. Even half of them would do. And if that persists, I suggest that if people have really tried real love, not just a little, for 2-3 months, and nothing's making a difference, they can't feel the love being given to them, go check it out. Go consider that diagnosis. See your physician. Next viewer says, there are lots of things going on in my life that make me feel victimized. My relationships, the kids, other stuff. Sometimes I take on a martyrdom attitude. I'm tearful. I tell people that I'm just tired or that it's that time of the month. I try to deal rationally with things on my own, saying things like, oh, poor me, but that's just life. And even though all these people are horrible to me and I can't do anything about it, it'll just be okay sometime. This will pass. But other times I become very angry and focused. Irritated at people, have no tenderness in my life. So what's going on here? When we feel pain, there are lots of ways to react to it. Lots of ways to be a victim. The martyrdom thing that you do is more of a pure victimhood. Oh, woe is me, how terrible it is. And then but it'll pass. I can do it. That's victimhood too, but then it's also looking for approval. Lying. I can do it. What you're really looking for is people to save you. But if you can't have that, then you'll lie and put yourself out as a great martyr, and then people will think better of you. And then the angry phase that you do is just attacking. Here are all these people who let me down and betrayed me and hurt me, and so now I'm going to kill them. I'm going to see to it that these people hurt at least as much as I do. So what's the solution? Almost always, the solution is a change in the way we see things. You can't just say, well, I'll just have to be tough and not act like a victim anymore. Good luck. Let me know if that works. But if you genuinely see a thing differently, how we see determines how we feel, and then determines how we behave. So it's an important step to realize that the price for living in a world where we all get to make our own choices in order to learn and grow, which is actually an enormous gift, the law of choice. That we get to make our own choices and learn and be happier is perhaps the greatest gift of all. But the price for that gift is that we have to be around while other people are making their flawed choices from which they learn. So we have to be affected by other people's mistakes. In other words, the price of living in a world where people get to make their own choices is that you have to, on some occasions, be hurt by me. I have to, on some occasions, be hurt by you. So on many occasions, we really are victimized. We are inconvenienced. We are victims of injustice. Terrible things happen to us. Hurricanes happen, for that matter. Drunk drivers drive over the median and slam into our car. These things are unavoidable. And recognizing that that is simply the price we pay for being in a world where we get to be infinitely happy, well then, okay. All right? Then it's not, oh, look, another terrible thing has happened. Then it's, so what am I going to learn from this? Just like if you have an athlete who has to train and run long distances, as he starts to run after a couple miles and his legs start to ache and he's sweating and it's hot, he doesn't stop and go, it's hot. Give me some air conditioning. Well, actually, some people do that, but somebody who understands the training process would say, this is just part of what I signed up for. It's part of what I have to go through to reach my goal of being more fit. Same thing with all the experiences we have in our lives. They're part of the deal. People sometimes say, well, how could God, for example, allow these terrible things to happen? You're kidding, right? What if they were all removed? What would we learn? We would just be taken care of. We would essentially become pets. Where's the joy in that? So all of these things are part of the training process, actually, as we strive to become perfectly happy. We need these things, including the difficult ones, including the things that are sometimes viewed by us as just horrible. Illness, pain, disease, death. It's how we learn to be the most loving. And when we get that, then we don't feel as victimized all the time. We don't cry about the rain. It just happens. Then we make a choice. Are we going to build shelter? Are we going to go inside? Are we going to put up an umbrella? What? You don't attack the rain. How dare you do this to me? Although I've seen many people actually do that. How dare it rain on me, my holiness. So it's about what we're going to do as difficult things happen. Here's a viewer that says, I've been studying real love for a few months now, and it's had a great impact on me. Being a college student has become so much easier, even during final exams. I'm also enjoying my work now as I use real love in the workplace principles there. Well, how fun for you, huh? The more loving we become, regardless of our circumstances, the happier we are. And that applies everywhere, at home, at work, at church, among our friends, every place. You continue. I'm teaching my 7-year-old daughter, and now she can distinguish between herself and others when they are angry. This has been very empowering for her. I mean, what you're teaching her is a miracle, that she can see that there's a difference between the person who is angry and her. Whereas we've been taught all of our lives, when somebody's angry, it has everything to do with us. No, actually, it doesn't. We're actually quite separated. And we always have a choice. We always have a choice about how we're going to respond to anything. So it doesn't matter what you do. I don't have to be angry. So for her to see this is just so freeing. And this has been all about your persistence in teaching her. Because usually when we first teach a child that other people don't make us angry and that we don't always get our way, lessons about responsibility, we're changing the rules midstream. For, in your case, 7 years you've been teaching her the old way. Then suddenly you say, oh, oops, my bad. We're going to change the rules for the rest of your life. Many children put up quite a fit at that point and say, whoa, wait a minute. What's this new stuff? You can't treat me like that. And they have little fits. So you've persisted. And that's just wonderful. I've been working with a man recently who has been teaching his teenage son. And the boy resisted and fought and kicked. And the dad was teaching the boy to be responsible instead of being an irresponsible victim. Well, that would involve things like work. That would involve the boy taking responsibility for his own choices. And the boy was not interested in learning this new way. So, he had little fits and called his father names and even at one point hit his father. But the father persisted, kept teaching true principles, kept loving his son, occasionally applying consequences. And I'll be darned if after a couple of months of that, the boy just, one day said to the father, I like this new way of living, and I'm going to keep doing this. I'm happier. And in fact, I've been secretly, he used the word secretly, but it hadn't been obvious to anybody, I've been teaching my mother some of these principles. And his mother was a queen victim. So it's affecting the entire family that this father persisted in doing what was right, even though in the short term it was difficult. Oh, that's everything in parenting. You continue, there's one major place where I'm faltering, and that's with my husband. I don't usually react to his comments or activities anymore, but this morning I am. I'm home alone, so he's unaware that I'm seeking advice. He does not want to do real love, and I am practicing so I can be clear what action happens next in our relationship. He has one foot out the door and is trying to provoke a reaction sometimes just to give him a justified reason for leaving me. I'm aware that he's drowning, and that has helped me get this far in coping with his being underemployed, having financial problems, and blaming me the whole while. For example, he's often last out of bed in the morning. And our previous rule had been whoever's last out of bed makes the bed. But now when he's last out of bed, he doesn't care. He doesn't make it. When he dusts a room, he doesn't put away the supplies, just leaves them there. He leaves dishes on the counter. He does the laundry, but ignores any load that is on the dryer because someone else washed it. So it's their responsibility to dry it. I tried countering by doing these same behaviors with him. I'll bet that went well. But he thought I was making war on him, so it didn't go well, I'll bet. So I don't know what to say to him. So from what you say here, and in your tone, there doesn't seem to be much in the way of criticism or attacking. You're describing just a major victim. How can you make me do anything? And somebody else washed those clothes, and so I'm not going to touch them. And he's whining and complaining. And of course, victims only have two ways to go when they're told that the way that they're behaving is foolish. They can either say, or even when just they see that their behavior is having unproductive results, they can either say, yes, I need to change. I need to make different choices. Unlikely, because they've been getting attention and power and feelings of worth all their lives from being the victim. So victims cannot say these words, I was wrong. They can't do it. It's impossible, like it's another language. So they can't do that. The second choice is they can blame you or whoever else is around them. So that's what victims do. Victims blame and whine and cry and manipulate. So it helps that you just see that that's what he's doing. It just helps you to understand him. Everything will be unfair to him. And any attempt that you make to help him see his behavior while you feel unloved or unloving will fail. So in the short term, you have to change. You're the one that has to get all the real love you can from conference calls and friends and reading and conferences and whatever, so that you feel as full as possible in dealing with him. Because even though he's being the victim and is being irresponsible, he will use any slight mistake that you make to blame everything on you. So, for example, in a given interaction, he may be immature at a level of 90. But if you make one little mistake, you're blaming or critical, he'll say you are unloving. He will not look at his own behavior. So all you can do is be as loving as you can, recognizing that he will tend to blame you even when you are being pretty loving while you're in the process of learning how to do that. So then so first you get as much love as you can, then you tell him the truth about yourself. You say, well, here are the things that I do wrong. Don't fall into the trap of saying, well, I can't tell him what I do wrong because then he'll feel excused in continuing to do what he does. No, just tell the truth. Say, look, this was my fault. I've been critical. I've been unsupportive, whatever. And then talk about the things you're learning. Like, for example, from the things that you're reading. One of the reasons that I put, if you go to twitter.com and type in Real Love Greg, I think. Is that it? You'll find that there's almost 200 what they call tweets now. And that's one of the big purposes for those, is to give people just something positive and real loving to be thinking about on any given day. And it can become the subject of the conversation that you have with him. You could say, well, I was just reading and it's 140 characters long. Good grief, how could you bore him? And so you say, I read this quote. Then you describe how it applies to you and what you're learning. You do that consistently for some time. You love him unconditionally the best you can. And then if he shows no interest in taking any responsibility, which, by the way, most victims do not, at some point you may have to actually teach him. You may have to say, it's important that we examine some aspect about some of the things you're doing because they seem to be harming you. You don't say, because they're annoying me. And of course, you'd have to get to a loving enough place where you could say this truthfully. But with victims, eventually, you really have to talk to them about their behavior. And if you may even have to persist. You may have to insist. I know a man who was trying to talk to his wife, and she was a complete victim about everything. And he said, here, I'd like to have some meetings where we talk about our relationship and our behavior and how we can become happier. She didn't want anything to do with it. And he said, well, I'm going to have these meetings. And so I'll be waiting at this place and this time and waiting to talk to you. And she didn't show up for the first couple. So he went and found her and had the meeting in whatever room she was in. Eventually, victims have to start telling the truth about their own behavior, or they can't feel loved. That's why you do it, not because, well, it's just not fair that you're the only one that tells the truth. So first yourself, and then eventually you may be able to talk to him about his behavior. I'm looking here at the... Here's a viewer who says, you recently told someone that it wasn't enough to know that we are loved by people, but that we have to hear it from them. I fall into that trap too, of thinking that I know that certain people care about me because I know it doesn't occur to me to ask them if they do, so that I can hear them say it. Can you talk about this subtle difference? Well, if you knew for a fact, down to your bones, that somebody loved you, then you might not have to ask them. But in nearly every case when I've asked somebody, so are there people that love you? There's this pause. And they go, yeah. Well, name them. Name somebody. And they name a person. So you know that just as you are, stupid, flawed, inconvenient, a victim, whiny, complaining, all that, you know that that person loves you completely. Well, how do you know? Well, and they're not sure. It can be enormously beneficial to actually ask some of the people in real love so that we can hear those words. It's not just the words. It's a feeling. And even on the phone, separated by 5,000 miles, you can feel it when somebody's really loving you. So it can be hugely beneficial. For example, it can be difficult sometimes for us to say, I love you, to somebody else. But I've discovered that it's far more difficult for us to say the words, you love me. Because once I say that to you, wow, I've laid down all my defenses, all my swords, knives, and guns, all my protecting behaviors, and I'm completely exposed. Now, you can hurt me. If I don't tell you that I know that you love me, you can't really hurt me. Because then I can just be snippy and say, well, see, I knew that you were going to do that. It's you. Whereas if I tell you, you love me, I'm like kind of committed to this now. And now, recognizing that you love me, if you withdraw it, you pull away, you sulk, you whatever, I can really feel disillusioned and hurt now. So it can be a difficult thing to say that. And one way to lead up to saying those words is to actually ask somebody we've known for a long time. So, I'm foolish, I'm stupid, I blame my wife when I'm unhappy, I yell at my kids, I'm not financially responsible, blah, blah, blah. And with all of that, you still love me. Yes. It can be just nourishing to hear those words. And then even better to say back to them, you love me, and I like it. Oh, man, that's a really touching moment. Here's a viewer who says, for most of the first 7 years of our marriage, my husband and I struggled. We went to counseling and retreats for the last 3 years, and then he asked me to leave. Now we've been separated for 2 years, have a 6-year-old son. We have not been intimate for 6 years in any way at all, not even holding hands despite my efforts to do so. He did have an affair when my son was 2 years old. So here's a guy who is not physically interested in you at all, hasn't been for 6 years, and yet 4 years ago or so, if I do the math right, he had an affair. So he's having an affair, but he's not physically interested in you. That's not only a sign that your relationship is really become pathologic, but it's really common in a marriage when, in this case he, sometimes it's the woman, has no interest in you, that he's probably addicted to porn. It's just a really high likelihood. I tell you that only to explain it, not to accuse him of anything. Don't go home and say, oh, he's a porn addict. But it helps us at least understand, how could this be? You say, I tried very hard to make our marriage work, but he said he'd had enough and wanted a divorce. I finally accepted his answer and let him go. But then I began to date and fell in love with a truly wise man for 6 months. He even asked me to marry him. And I broke it off only because my husband, Ralph, decided he wanted to try again after all those many times that I tried to make it go. And I felt an obligation to my husband. So it's very common, you can separate from somebody who's not interested in you, and now what they experience is relief. It's like, oh, no pressure. Whoa, the witch is gone. But then you find a guy who is interested in you, and he's going, wait a minute. Maybe she's more valuable than I thought. Maybe I'm losing something here worthwhile. And then jealousy sets in, and he's feeling a loss of power and control. And so you'll see spouses who just completely detached, but when their partner finds a new partner, suddenly they want to make things work, which it turns out they don't really want to make things work. They just want to have everything. They want to have the complete detachment from their partner, but no feelings of jealousy, so their partner has to stay in a monastery for the rest of his or her life. Victims want everything their way. So common thing. You continue. Ralph and I both listened to both the Real Love and Marriage CD and the Real Love CDs. And it's been 2.5 months since I broke off from my boyfriend, who has been very understanding and wants me to be happy. Well, how cool is that? Sounds like positive qualities in your boyfriend, at least. My husband and I have not lived a married life for 2 years. So now, do we view our relationship as though we were dating and evaluating if we want to be together, or do we view our relationship as being married and follow the principles in Real Love and Marriage? For example, do we move in together? Do we have sex together? How do we handle this? Because we've been separated for so long. You're married. So being married isn't a game. This isn't checkers that you can, push it away and tip all the pieces over and walk off. You're in this thing. Now, at some point, you can always divorce, but if you've decided you want to work on it, you're a married couple. You're not dating. And so Real Love and Marriage would be the book that you would read. And you, as you said, there's been no intimacy for 6 years. Well, this is something that you need to be looking at. And I would suggest that if you've been detached and not talking to each other for this long, doing it yourselves would be unlikely to be productive. From everything that you said here, I would suggest that you get a coach that can coach you both on regular conference calls so that you can deal with these intimacy issues right off. Initiate sex with him. Initiate touching, holding, caressing, caring for in every imaginable way. And then as issues come up, you talk about those so that your coach can say, Ralph, how do you feel when she does this? And she can get to the root of what's been going on. You said, Ralph doesn't want us to live together because he feels he's not comfortable. Well, I'll bet he's not. I mean, living apart is a breeze. It's free. It has no responsibility. And so most people who have issues with feeling safe love separation. No threat, no fulfillment, but most people avoid pain with greater diligence than they pursue pleasure. And so I'm sure he loves being separated from you. Well, tough. If he wants to work on the relationship and wants you to leave your boyfriend, then he's going to have to actually work on it. Not just dangle you from a string and hold you there as his partner in name while you date once every 6 months. That's just nuts. I mean, either move into an intimate, loving relationship or get out. You said that there's still no intimate connection between us, no passion, no desire for sex. Well, so you need to find out why and start working on it. In the past 3 months, we've had only one date alone without our son. Well, see, here you've left your boyfriend and, you're still married. So having a boyfriend while you're still married has its own set of complicating problems. But to say that you're working on this with your husband and to have dated him once in 3 months, that's not working on it. That's just being put on a shelf where he can, use you when he wants to, but when he feels uncomfortable, in his words, then he just backs off and leaves you on the shelf. And now he can refer to you as his wife, who needs him, and he's important as your husband, but he incurs no risk. Well, relationship is risk, honey. It's exposing yourself and making mistakes and looking stupid, which the two of you are not doing. This isn't going steady in high school. You said, I've not put any pressure on him, but I'm beginning to think that I'll waste my whole life here while nothing happens. And I will have given up a special relationship with a boyfriend for nothing. Well, exactly. So get a move on, honey. Call him up and say, let's go. Let's make a go of this. Let's move in together. Let's start doing things together. Let's get a coach like right now. Go on the website. You can learn about different coaches that are available. Call here, write here. You can write to me at greg@reallove.com. We'll recommend some coaches. But get going. This is your whole life. This isn't just some little thing. This isn't a vacation we're talking about. This isn't learning to play tennis. This is the whole reason we're alive, to be happy. And yet, people spend thousands of dollars, I see it all the time, on a vacation, on a car, on a riding lawnmower. But when it comes to making substantive changes in the happiness in their life, they say, ooh, I don't know if I can afford that in terms of money, time, energy, exposure, and so on. Well, baby, this is the whole deal. The whole game is relationships and being happy. So I would suggest you dive into it with abandon, so to speak. And yeah, you might get hurt, and well, gee, too bad, huh? It's just what it takes to learn and to grow. Let's see. A friend of 20 years recently told me something about his past that really creeped me out. I'm devastated that this happened, and I don't want to be in his life anymore. Is that betraying the real love concept? It would help, you don't have to tell me what really creeped you out, but that may identify him too much, so you don't have to. But you said, I'm devastated. I don't want to be in his life anymore. I feel guilty for leaving the friendship since he was honest with me. I should add that he was responsible for the creepy thing that happened. It was a choice he made. Well, without knowing what it is, geez, honey, all the things that we do are in response to our emptiness and pain. All of them. I haven't seen an exception. So I have good friends. I mean, good, close friends that we invite over to the house, who stay with us for periods of time, that I talk to regularly, who are convicted child sexual molesters, who are murderers, rapists, people who've committed all the most horrible crimes on the planet. And once they see that they only did these things out of their pain, once they see that there's a way out of their behavior, that they can actually feel unconditionally loved by people who know what they have done, they become different people. I can still remember a man who told a whole group of guys one day, many years ago, that he had been sexually molesting his daughter for years. And, that would have been almost by society standards, a justified occasion to be horrified. Oh, you've what? This whole room full of men, he was sitting on the floor, weeping. This whole room full of men sat down on the floor next to him and just put their hands on him and kind of collectively held him, if you can picture this. And he just sobbed for the longest time. Felt completely accepted by these men. Now, some people would say, well, now, you have to tell them they did the wrong thing. You grow up. You're kidding, right? You think that he didn't know it was the wrong thing. Why do you think he was weeping? Why do you think he'd kept this piece of information from the entire planet until that moment? Because he knew perfectly well that it was the wrong thing. And yet we think we have to drive it in. Like saying to a guy who's murdered somebody, now, you know that was wrong, right? Yeah, they know. They knew at the time. They were horrified afterward. They shrink in guilt from every living person. And as this man felt accepted and loved, as they asked what kind of life he'd been living to get him to that place. Oh, horribly empty and afraid and alone. He just became a different person. And they kept loving him. And he repaired things with his daughter, with his wife, to the point that, it's been many years now, to the point that now this man who many people would have sent to prison, there are some advantages to being in groups where none of us are licensed therapists, because we don't have to report anything, whereas a therapist would have had to report this. He's become so healthy that he's now in a new completely healthy and loving marriage. He's learned to love his daughter. She's forgiven him to the point where when she goes places, he takes care of her kids. Now, imagine if it had gone the old way and he'd gone to prison for his crime, where he would have learned that he was even more worthless than he had previously thought, would have felt horrible about himself, possibly killed, and then he would have come out into society, been labeled a sex offender. Then everywhere he'd gone, he would have had that label. In some cities, posted on their homes, shunned by everyone, wouldn't have had a productive job, which he now does have. Certainly wouldn't have ended up taking care of his daughter's children. What the man needed was just to be loved. So it would be hard to imagine that what your friend told you was creepier than some of these things. It's just understanding people. I hear people tell me stuff all the time that you think, whoa. But once you understand why, it's like you just feel pain for them, that somebody would act in such a horribly counterproductive way. So it's just a thought. I've known, you came on here and said I didn't look down. That, yeah, it was molesting a child. Oh, honey, I've known lots of child molesters now. Priests, men, women. And child molesters might be some of the saddest people who take breath on the earth. They're just alone. I mean, imagine by the time you molest a child, what kind of ability would you have to have a relationship with any adult? None. Every child molester I've talked to has had, I'm trying to think of an exception and I can't right off, has had no healthy relationships with an adult. None. And so if you want to go and connect with another human being, which we all have to, what group of people would be the safest? Little children. Little children don't ever look at you and go, oh, put on a little weight, haven't you? Got a job yet? Did you clean up the kitchen after you used it? They don't make little snotty critical comments. What are you making of yourself? They just adore you. They just look up at you and smile at you and look to you for acceptance. And when an adult who has no healthy relationships and is completely alone sees that look of connection, they just melt. Most of the men that I've talked to who have molested children have said that wasn't even what they were looking for. They weren't looking for sex. It was just a connection. They just felt closer to this little kid who adored them. And then, after the emotional connection was made, the natural sexual impulses that people just experience kind of become inflamed and then out of control. Because remember, they haven't had a healthy relationship with an adult. Most of them haven't had sex with an adult, in many cases, ever. And here's this little kid who's smiling at them, adoring them, and accepting them. And they're going, oh, wow, poof, it goes to sex. Oh, I mean, look how easy it does that for people who are not molesting children. Look how easy that works for teenage boys and girls. Here's this little girl who never contemplated having sex at all. And here's this guy who just adores and accepts her. And she's going, take me, I'm yours. Poof. And that took all of, 15 minutes. So it's just really easy for emotional attachment to go into physical intimacy. And so creepy, well, it's kind of scary. It's kind of horrifying, both for the child and, frankly, more horrifying for the adult. Children recover easier from being sexually molested than the adults do. The molesters, without an enormous amount of unconditional love, they're doomed. They're not going to change. Whereas if you love a child enough early on, their wounds heal quicker. They're not as deep. They're not as repetitive. They're not as chronic. So anyway, just something to consider, cutting some slack to your creepy friend. Here's somebody who says, as I've made changes in my life, I've consistently told my wife that she does not have to change. She said, however, that my changes affect her, and she has no choice but to accept it. like social outings, leisure time, and so on. Can you speak about how to help her see that she still has choices and how she can make requests of me if it's something that she'd like to do? Victims are all about helplessness and how things are being done to them, how things weren't being done for them, about how they weren't being considered, about how they couldn't help it. And so they see everything in those terms. It's like, the old phrase, if you're a hammer, everything becomes a nail. If you're a victim, everything is done to you or was withheld from you or, it's just awful. That's how they see everything. So you explain to her, okay, I get it. As I change, it affects you. So that whereas before I would have gone into the other room and used porn and stayed by myself and left you to do whatever you want, which in some cases wives actually enjoy. Many wives complain about the behavior of their husbands, but actually they like having them out of their way. Whereas now, I'm choosing to, for example, discuss things that I'm learning. I'm choosing to go on outings. I'm taking the kids on sports events. Essentially, you are pummeling her with choices she never had to make before. And because victims are all about avoiding pain, even pleasing people sometimes, but see, even as they please people, there's always a hook. Because if they do something to please you, there will be a price that they will exact for that. So here you are giving her all these choices, and now she either has to say no, in which case she has to deal with the possibility that you might not like her saying no. She can't even imagine somebody just accepting her when she says no, because it's never happened. You probably haven't been very accepting of her either. And certainly her parents and others were not, or she wouldn't have grown up a victim. So when you say, well, let's all go on a family picnic, for example, instead of just sitting around and doing nothing like we usually do. Now she has to go, I don't want to do that. And then she looks like the unloving, horrible, nasty witch that she's afraid she is. Or she says, okay, when she doesn't really want to. Because now she has to get the meal ready and the basket and the blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of work. And then she has to go out and actually interact with people as opposed to just complaining about them. Much easier to complain. So you've put her in a position where now she has to make these terrible choices, and she feels like no matter which one she makes, she's screwed. And in the world of a victim, she is. No matter which way she goes, she's going to either feel like she was done to, or somebody wasn't sensitive to her, or she's going to have to hurt somebody else's feelings. It's just pain, pain, pain. So she kind of preferred the old way. So now you can explain to her, I'm going to be doing things differently. I'm going to go on a picnic. I'm going, whatever it is. You get to do whatever you want. If you say, no, Fred, I'm not going. I'd rather stay here. You don't even have to explain why. This is really important. We had some people during the Christmas holidays. We had quite a lot of people here. People visiting, family, and so on. And one of the visitors said to me one day, I've been here for a week, and I haven't heard anybody be cross with anybody. Good. And this person said, and when somebody doesn't want to do something, they just say, I don't want to do it. And nobody says to them, oh, please, please, please come and do it. They don't beg them. They don't say, well, why don't you want to do it? They don't quiz them. Then they don't make them feel guilty afterward, because in our family, sometimes when we do family activities, if there's, say, 12 people here, sometimes 10 people go. And 2 people say, I'm just staying home. Sometimes we all go, but we'll be at a restaurant, for example, and one person says, well, I want to sit over there. For whatever reason. Everybody else wants to sit in another place. Well, then we don't say anything. The person who wants to sit over there sits over there. Then other people get to make their own choice. Do we all want to sit over here together and leave that one person alone? Or do we want to, some of the people in the group, go sit with the person who's making a choice to sit in that location for whatever reason? You get to always make your own choice. You don't ever need to feel pressured. That's entirely up to you. So you tell her that. If you say, I don't want to go, I'm not even going to push you. Now, on some occasions, I might say to you, so is there anything about the activity particularly that makes you not want to go? If I can modify it, then I would. For example, what if she said, well, I'd love to go all out with you to the park, but I don't want to have to fix the food. And you say, okay, we'll stop by blank, someplace, and we'll get takeout there and we'll take that to the park. Now you don't have to fix food. Would that make it where you wanted to go? Well, no, I just don't want to go. Then you're done. Then you tell her. That's all you have to say. I don't want to go. There isn't anything you could do that make it easier. I just don't want to go. And then you say, well, fine. Then the kids and I will go to the park. But you can't have everything. So she's right in that some of your decisions irrevocably and unavoidably affect her. So if you decide to go to the park with the kids, she decides not to go, and the kids all go with you, now she's at home with no kids. So she can't make her decision with no consequences. But whether she feels guilty or angry is entirely up to her. But you get to make your own choices. You don't have to pussyfoot around and then say, well, maybe we shouldn't go to the park because then Mom will be mad. See how that sucks? That's just awful. Families do that every place. That's what couple of the visitors here recently said. At home, every time somebody does something, they either have to explain themselves, feel guilty, be mad, something. So you can do whatever you want, but you also get to choose not to be angry. And you tell her that. You can stay home, you can go with us, whatever. We're not going to beg you. But if you choose to be annoyed about it, that would be your choice. So she's right. You are affecting her. But whether you affect her, you're only affecting her in details, circumstances, where you go and so on. Whether she's mad or guilty or whatever is up to her. And you tell her that, both so she feels free and so you feel free and don't feel like you have to please her every minute or alter where you're going or what you're doing so she won't be mad. Because you'll discover that if you do something particularly for the purpose of her not being mad, she's not going to be happy anyway. Once somebody's decided to be a victim, it really doesn't matter what you do. You can make them less mad, but happy? Nah. So why play that game? That's just field to death and everybody dies. No, make a happy choice and stay on the field of life. So, very fun questions, like wonderful, as usual. We'll meet back here in a week. Please send me some new questions at greg@reallove.com. We'll get back together next Tuesday, and between now and then, surprise, remember that it's always about real love. See you then.